Hello, everybody. I'm Robert Franz, music director of the Windsor Symphony Orchestra, and I am here with the star of the opera Orfeo, Erin Armstrong. Hello, Erin.
Hi, Robert.
You know, any day that I get to make music with you is a great day in my book.
I agree. It's the most fun. It's so much
We
fun.
have we have a blast every time we get together, even if we're going to be working on a tragedy together, like we are in Orfeo.
It's very sad.
It is, although there is a happy ending coming, so don't anybody panic. We will have a happy ending for you. So I think the first thing, Aaron, that we need to get out of the way right away
Okay.
is that Orfeo is a male and you are a female. Can you explain to us why it is that you are singing the role of Orfeo in this opera that we're performing?
Yeah. So many moons ago, and this is no longer a practice that we have in our culture, but young men there used to be castrati. And so if a young man expressed a beautiful vocal tone and an affinity for the stage, then they would be castrated, and so that they didn't go through puberty, and so their voices remained high. And because at the time the thinking was that the higher the male voice, the more heroic, like the greater the hero, right? So um, in Gluck's time, that was still happening, and even luckily we don't do this anymore because that sounds horrible. So instead, all of these roles, and they're mostly in it, like I know Gluck is kind of the end of early music technically, but in a lot of early music, the male heroes are written for higher soprano voices or mezzo soprano voices. So now, in order to achieve the same color and work with the vocal range that's there, women get to sing the parts. There are the occasional countertenors and male sopranos that get to do it, which is really cool. And it's a very interesting color when you get to hear it. It it has a very ethereal quality and I love it, but it doesn't have the same kind of like power that a mezzo can get often because the lower register is more powerful in a woman, oddly, than in a man who's singing it. So that's why I get to be a man.
And we call those
Woo!
roles pants roles, huh,
Pants
Aaron?
rolls. We do. Pants
Yeah.
rolls. They're ever present in opera all over the place.
Yeah. So for you, I happen to know that this pants roles and this idea of being a mezzo is kind of new to you. Um, Talk to me about how you approach a role like this and what it means to you now as opposed to what it would have meant to you 10 years ago.
Okay. So it's interesting actually because 10 years ago I was a young artist, or I was kind of at the end of my young artist, but I watched a lot of my colleagues at that time be coached in pants roles. And, a lot of them were tall and athletic looking. So for some of them, like it really, really, really worked. I am a shorter pants person, but there's lots of us too that are not that tall. I'm only 5'6". Um, and I remember though the idea of the center of gravity of being different. So I watched a lot of these coachings and I've been thinking about it recently because I'm trying to find my walk. You have to find the gait, especially it's different if you're singing it in concert and it's just the voice that has to portray it or the face, but because we're going to be staging it, I have to walk like a man. And I've been trying to find my manly my manly walk. Because it's really how you carry yourself, and it's also the little things that you do with your hands that are the most obvious, I think. And 10 years ago I was also singing as a soprano. So I was singing a lot of like love characters. So there's a lot of like sighing and beautiful hand gestures and things, or even just feminine things, effeminate things that you can do with your body. And I have to cut those out because I'm the hero. I'm supposed to be a very masculine character. So I've been trying to tune in to that feeling. And I don't think I am without my own sense of like strength and masculinity as a person. So finding it is okay, but at the same time I really don't think that I have yet found my awesome manly walk, Robert. I'm working on it. And
Well,
I'm
and
that's the
as
biggest
we
challenge for me.
record as we record this interview, it is only July, and
Yeah,
so
we've got
you
time.
have till January to discover that manly walk when we
Yeah,
will all see you on stage. Now, this story is a love story,
it is.
obviously, but it's also got a very tragic sense. And your character Orfeo is at the wedding altar with Theodorice, the love of his life, when she gets bit by a snake and dies.
Yeah.
And I think for many of us who lose someone, we think, well, what would happen if we could bring them back? Your longing is so strong that you want to bring them back.
Yep.
And that is indeed what Orfeo, or Orpheus, as we call him in English, that's exactly what he does here when
Yep.
he goes down to hell and he brings Euridice back. So talk to us a little bit about singing a role that really is sort of the tragic hero in this love story.
You know, you can't just be sad the whole time, right? So as I've been going through the score, and it's a lot of solo singing. It's mostly solo singing, actually, because we're telling the story in different bits, and you kind of get to work with, you get to witness Orfeo's character as he kind of goes through like the cycles of grief in a little ways. I mean, it all happens very fast, of course, because it's an opera, but it's true. He's so overcome with grief at the thought of losing his wife on this beautiful day that he cries out, and his pain, his anguish is so intense that the gods are like, okay, 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 sure, we'll let you journey down, but you can't look at her. You can't look at her. So I think that we'll get to go on a journey together, the audience, and you actually, the orchestra, you and all of us, the many of us. Because how big's the orchestra?
The orchestra is going to be about 25 players, but then there'll be about 60 members of the chorus. So there's a chorus on stage.
Right.
There are the three soloists, and then
then
there are the dancers. There'll be about a dozen dancers or so, I believe.
so we'll be 100 strong going on this journey together as Orpheus, as Orpheus, take us through all of the stages of grief, and but at the same time, not trying to be just sad all the time, because you can't be sad all the time. It doesn't work. There's this ebb and flow. So there's still moments of joy when he remembers her, and there's also some anger as she's like, why did this happen? And all of those things. And I had a director once who told me that there's really only three emotions, even though you can go a lot deeper, but you're either mad, sad, or glad. So those are the three main ones and then we kind of spin off from there. But it's true. Those are kind of the big three, the important three.
So this is a gigantic role, and you already mentioned that a lot of it is solo, and that's kind of how this piece is written. It's not really an ensemble piece per se, in
No.
what you might expect, like a Marriage of Figaro or a Magic Flute or an opera by Mozart to be.
Right.
Not a lot of duets, although there is a duet and a trio at the end, but like not a lot of that. It's a lot of solo. How do you go about preparing? So this opera is about 90 minutes long in total. And I would say probably you sing for 60 to 70 minutes of it would be my guess. How do you go about memorizing and preparing and learning such a major score? What is your process?
Well, I started a while ago, right when we first started talking about it. I bought the score. What's funny is that I bought the wrong score first. I bought the Ricordi, and then we decided that we were doing the Vienna edition, so I had to buy the Baron Rider, which is totally fine. But in the
Which,
Ricordi, there's this is sort
which
of
by the way,
yeah,
the Vienna version that we're doing is the original version
right,
that Gluck wrote. So we are not doing. He rewrote the opera a couple of times
right.
for different audiences and different audience tastes, but we're gonna be very Viennese and very original.
Love that. I love Vienna. Anyway, but I learned the trio first at the end of the original one because it's so pretty. And we're not doing that trio, which is hilarious. But anyway, so my process, I start with highlighting my score and kind of just getting familiar with the scenes and kind of like a rough overall breakdown. And then I usually start with text and rhythm. And luckily for me, I find that in the early music land, like I have an ear for it, and I have a natural feeling for it. So I don't find the memorization as tricky as I do with some other things. German repertoire is harder for me to memorize, also because I don't sing German as often. The language is trickier for me. My Italian is pretty good as well, which means that it's easier. I'm a passable speaker in Italian now, so I don't have to do as much translating of the text either, which helps because I start with text. And then the melodies, I know quite a lot of them over the years anyway. I've heard quite a few. So those ones are also, they're beautiful too. And I find that the beauty of Gluck and in the, again, late end of the early land, I love it. I love Handel. I love Gluck. I think it's also beautiful. And I find it really fits nicely in my voice. There's an ease that my voice achieves when I sing this repertoire. So I don't get tired when I practice, which is also nice. Sometimes when I endeavor to sing big Verdian roles, I go a little bit overboard and then I get a little fatigued and I have to take a break. I don't find that that is true here, but I also write out the text. So when I'm trying to see if I have it memorized, I write out the text. I listen when I'm cleaning. I listen when I'm driving. I don't just listen to recordings that exist. I record myself at a slower pace, at a slower tempo, and I'll either tap myself or I'll tap the piano so I hear the subdivision, and I'll speak it in rhythm so that I can hear it while I'm driving, and that's what I listen to when I drive. Or and then once I'm ready, I'll record it again and I sing it to myself, but at a slower tempo to really make sure I'm hearing the pitches and the words that helps me memorize big time. Because I also have a toddler, so I don't have just like all this time in the world to sit there and at a piano. I have to integrate it into my life.
Do you find that learning it slowly like that makes it easier when you speed it up to actual tempo? Because I would
Yes.
imagine learning it slowly like that also has certain breath control challenges and just sort
Mm,
of um,
right.
intellectual challenges.
So I find that if I know what the beat is and I know where the downbeat is, then I tend not to have as many issues. If I have to learn something a little bit more quickly, or if there's not as clear a beat as there tends to be in Gluck's music, so say Strauss sometimes gets confusing, the beat gets lost, or some of the new music I've sung, I'm like, where's the beat? Or the meter changes all the time. It can, if I know where the beat is and I have practiced, I know that que faro senza, I know which syllable arrives on which beat, and I know it not always intellectually. Like I'm not sure it's a beat three, four. I can feel the beats. I can feel how many beats pass between when I sing and when I don't sing. That's the most important thing for me, to stay present with you and to stay moving through the piece correctly with you. Still, there's always room for error because you get in the moment, have an emotional burst or something, and then you stop feeling this because you're feeling everything else, or you there's a moment where you have to count or you have to do something technical, and then you forget to, like, it happens. But at the same time, I have found over the years, when I commit to this sort of disciplined practice, and I often honestly bruise my sternum I'm tapping because I want to feel it in my soul. I want to feel connected to that rhythm in my soul, and then I tend to have a more successful run of or production. Yeah,
Now,
yeah,
what you just sang a snippet of is actually something that you and I have done already together and happens to be the most famous aria that Orfeo
yeah,
sings, Che farò senza Euridice?
yep.
What will I do without Euridice?
I know.
This is the moment, and I know I might be breaking the surprise for some of our audience members, but this is the moment when they are almost out of the cave, almost back up to the surface, and by accident, definitely not on purpose, Orfeo turns and looks at Euridice, and the only rule was you cannot look at Euridice, or she will die a second time and permanently this time. So it is this aria, I think, is easily the emotional apex of this opera. Talk to us a little bit about this aria, and it's also sort of odd because it's in what we call a major key. So it's you would think of it being sort of in a minor key, which is tends to be darker and sad and really kind of morose. And rather, it's in a major key, but there's some real intensity underneath it. Talk to us a little bit about this aria.
So yeah, you have there's one theme or melody that returns three times, and each time, it's in its own, it's I guess a quickened stages of grief, kind of. And I think at the beginning there's also a little bit of a disbelief, and I think that might be why it starts in a major key, because it would be really hard to accept that this had just happened, especially in the moment, especially after everything that he's gone through to get her back, and their love, kind of triumphing for him to be allowed to go get her. He finds her, he can bring her back, he doesn't succeed at it. Like that sucks. And I think he's a little like shocked. And I actually wondered this recently myself. So that's cool that you asked me that because I think that might be one of the reasons it could be in a major key to begin. And maybe there's something else that you've read and you can enlighten me on this, but I was getting that sort of sense because then not the first, I guess we'll call it, that's the A section. Then there's a B and it goes A and then C and then A, right? So because C is in a minor key. And he says, ah, non mavaz, I can't go any further. He's like, well, that's it. And that goes to our minor key. And then he is just like, nope, I'm done. But he still, then he picks it up and he has to continue anyway, or else he stays in it.
Well, and the challenge really is that Eurydice does not know he's not allowed to look at her. And
That's
so
right.
she is, quite frankly, I think in this opera, a little naggy, right? She's sort of nagging him. And she gets sort
Of
of
course.
her level of upsettedness becomes higher and higher. And sort of she becomes more agitated. And I
She's
think,
begging
you
him.
know, she is, but she's also kind of a little bit over it, right? Like I don't think she's just like, she's not just sweet Eurydice saying it. She's kind of like, hey, what's wrong with you? Why are you not doing, why won't
Yeah.
you look at me? Like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with you? And
Yeah.
so I think for Orfeo, I can imagine that him turning around in response to her pleading and nagging and all the things
Mhm.
she was doing must have sent him just into orbit with all of the emotions he must have
Oh,
felt all at once.
for sure. I don't know how it couldn't.
Well, what's interesting about this opera is that unlike the operas that happened before, which were really about showing off the singer, this opera is really about telling the story, which
Yes.
explains why it's only 90 minutes as opposed to 3 or 4 hours long, like a typical 18th
Yep.
century opera. And it will be sung in Italian, but our audience can rest assured that we will have the translation going at all times above the heads of the singers,
Yep.
and with a lot of a lot of things going on stage. But Erin, having you in the center of this, in fact, when I thought about programming this opera, the first person I thought about was you as Orfeo, because
That's
you and I
fun.
have had so much fun working together over the years that I thought this was the perfect vehicle for your voice and for our collaboration. So, Erin, we look forward to hearing you in the role of Orfeo. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. I'm super excited.